I'm Chris Otter. I'm Associate Professor of History at The Ohio State University. I was trained in three different fields, actually. I was trained as a British and European historian. I was trained in literature and literary theory, and I was trained in the history of science. And so I've kind of triangulated all of these and come up with the sort of history of environment and technology. The first book I wrote is a history. I like to work on the history of things that historians often don't tend to look at. The history of things that are very consequential but often aren't written about. Technological systems being one of these things. Electricity, gas systems, water supply systems, housing, infrastructure, and so on. And in my first book, I did a tremendous amount of empirical research on the construction of these systems. And when I read this alongside the historiography and theory of the period, I found there was a great disjuncture. For my first book, I was in Manchester and London, mainly in England. I used a lot of municipal archives. I also used a lot of engineering documents, engineering journals, building journals, public health literature. There's, in the 19th century, a vast outpouring of writing on the built environment, and you find some peculiar and interesting things in there, if you're prepared to look. I like reading very, very dull technical things, and I found my niche. In the history of technology class that I teach, the majority of students come from the sciences, and particularly from engineering. So these are students who don't have a background in history, but who have an interest in technology and find an interest in the history of technology. And they really enjoy the class. They find it to be great fun. When I get students like this, they generally have, implicitly or otherwise, a weak view of history. The idea that one thing succeeds another thing, and it's just better simply because it succeeded. That is demolished in this class. We can see plenty of examples of technologies that were in many ways palpably better than competing technologies that are not used. So I think that what engineering students get from the class is this idea that their job is not just applied technological or scientific skills. It's not just about them working out what's most efficient and this being obvious. They realize there's a social and cultural component to this, inescapably. If you're a history major, you're trained, there's very specific skills and also very, very general skills. You learn how to construct an argument, how to make an argument, logically and clearly. You learn how to write and how to write well and how to write better. You learn how to read. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but in a sense, you learn how to read a document well. You learn how to scrutinize it, how to scrutinize its language, how to tease out alternative meanings. You will read a text in class, and many people will contribute their own readings to this, and you realize a document is complicated. And whenever you read anything, it's complicated. So you learn to read, you learn to write, you learn to argue. And these skills, these don't fit one particular career. They fit almost any career you could possibly wish to get. Famine has become, in many ways, more prevalent in the modern world than any previous period, which seems sort of counterintuitive. But we generally have a system which relies upon markets to solve problems. And storage systems are food storage systems in, say, early modern China, say, early modern Europe. These things, by and large, have been demolished, and we allow markets to govern the way people are fed. And markets keep failing. And we see this in the case of Ireland, which is one of the most appalling famines in human history, where we see a basic commitment to free market ideology and an absolute absence of infrastructure combining with a racial prejudice to allow effectively 1 million people to die and another 1 million people to emigrate. Ireland is still the only country in Europe whose population is lower than it was in 1840. History is by its very nature, a profoundly interdisciplinary subject. For me, I spend half my time reading science and technology as much as I spend reading history. When it comes to the classroom, some of the materials my students get to read are from science books as well as history books, also from economics and so forth. So my students, when they come into the classroom, are not getting purely history in history. They're getting other disciplines interwoven seamlessly, I think. And they can see that history is not some kind of isolated part of the curriculum, which is, as it were, separate from science or separate from technology. They will realize that science and technology have a history. A lot of the work I do in the history of science and technology and environment is directly concerned with actually looking at contemporary problems and realizing that they have a long history, and realizing that the issues that we have with our ecologies, for example, are in many ways quite ancient. Humans have always been a constructive and destructive species. They build stuff and they face the consequences, the environmental consequences of this building. And so what's particularly interesting is how we got from this being a local problem to it being a global problem. And this is something I think that begins with the Industrial Revolution.